And we are waiting to see if it's the president who takes the podium there or the vice president, but they're waiting. As we wait for this briefing to begin, I want to go to Dr. Joseph Fair. What's at the top of your list? What question do you want answered here today?
So, first of all, I'm very happy to see that we finally engaged the commercial sector to get more testing out. That being said, we've engaged 2 companies. There are dozens of companies that can produce commercial diagnostics. I think you need to be engaging every single one of them right now to get them through and get them started through that EUA process.
And here is the president. Let's listen in.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. Thank you. Progress being made. And I appreciate you all joining us. Last night, the FDA announced groundbreaking new policies to further increase testing, very substantially so. All states can now authorize tests developed and used within their borders in addition to the FDA. So the states are very much involved. They have been involved from the beginning, but we're stepping it up as much as we can, and the testing procedures are going well. And within a short period of time, all of the private labs will kick in. This has never been done before, and it's going to be something I think it's going to be incredible if it's done properly. And these are great companies. These are among the greatest companies in the world, actually. So the state's going to be dealing through themselves and with local government, local physicians, local everybody. They're also dealing with us, but we have a tremendous testing capacity. Today, we're also announcing a dramatic expansion of our Medicare telehealth services. Medicare patients can now visit any doctor by phone or video conference at no additional cost, including with commonly used services like FaceTime and Skype. A historic breakthrough. This has not been done before either. In addition, states have the authority to cover telehealth services for their medical patients. And by doing this, the patient is not seeing the doctor per se, but they're seeing the doctor, so there's no getting close. During this time, we will not enforce applicable HIPAA penalties so that doctors can greatly expand care for their patients using telehealth, so the penalties won't be enforced. We encourage everyone to maximize use of telehealth to limit exposure to the virus. It's been a very successful method of communication, but never used on a scale like we're going to use at telehealth. And you'll be able to also better maintain hospital capacity by doing this. Earlier this morning, I spoke with executives from America's fast food industry, Wendy's, McDonald's, all of the big ones, Burger King, and they were great. We're talking about the pickups in light of yesterday's guidance you heard. To avoid eating or drinking at bars, restaurants, or public food courts, we discussed the important role that the drive-through pickup and delivery service can play in the weeks ahead. So that's happening, and they have been fantastic. They have been absolutely fantastic, and they've been doing it already, but they're keeping it open, and smaller staffs, they're very capable people and very capable companies, and they're doing it, pickups. Our guidance yesterday urges Americans to take action for 15 days to help stem the outbreak. So it's a 15-day period. I guess now would say it's a 14-day period. It's 15 days from yesterday, and we're asking everyone to work at home if possible, postpone unnecessary travel, and limit social gatherings to no more than 10 people. By making shared sacrifices and temporary changes, we can protect the health of our people, and we can protect our economy, because I think our economy will come back very rapidly. So it's 15 days from yesterday. We'll see what happens after that. If we do this right, our country and the world, frankly, but our country can be rolling again pretty quickly. We have to fight that invisible enemy, that I guess unknown, but we're getting to know it a lot better. Today, the Senate has taken up coronavirus legislation that includes free testing for those who need it, as well as paid sick leave and family medical leave for workers affected by the virus. We're also committed to getting small businesses the support that they need. In fact, one of the things we talked about with the fast food operations, we spoke to the chairman and CEOs of all of the companies, but one of the things we discussed is exactly that, getting small businesses support and flexibility that they need for themselves and for their workers, and that's being worked on right now. At my direction, Secretary Mnuchin is meeting today with senators on additional stimulus packages. I can tell you he was meeting with them late until the night last night, and for a big part of the day yesterday, and tremendous things are happening. There's great spirit, tremendous spirit, and I can say that for Republicans and Democrats. I can say that with respect to Governor Cuomo, we had a great talk this morning. We're both doing a really good job, and we're coordinating it. And we agree, different states need different things, and we agree on that 100%. But we had a very good talk, and I think we're right down the same track, and it's going to be very successful. New York has a pretty big problem, I guess, would be the number one hot spot. That's no fault of anybody's. It's just the way it is. But we're working very closely together. We're also getting FEMA very much involved. They've been involved, but now we're getting them to a different level. And we'll have everything ready. We're dealing with the Army Corps of Engineers should that be necessary. We have them working in some cases, on standby in other cases. But my conversation with Andrew Cuomo was a very, very productive one and a very good one. I appreciate that. We're giving relief to affected industries and small businesses, and we're ensuring that we emerge from this challenge with the prosperous and growing economy, because that's what's going to happen. It's going to pop. One day we'll be standing possibly up here, we'll say, well, we won. And we're going to say that. Sure as you're sitting there, we're going to say that. And we're going to win. And I think we're going to win faster than people think, I hope. Later today, I'll meet with the leaders from the tourism industry, as well as industrial supply retailers and wholesalers, to discuss their critical roles. As you know, I met with the department store people, all of the retailers, the big ones, including Walmart and others. And it was a great meeting. They're stocking up their stores like they've never stocked them before. We're trying to get people to actually buy less, if that's possible. Buy less. Don't take everything, just buy what you need for a while. They're going to stay open all hours of the day, and they've been fantastic. We're taking aggressive action now as one nation and one family so that America can rebound stronger, frankly, stronger than ever before. And we recognize that while many American workers can work from home, many others cannot. Many of our healthcare providers, first responders, and men and women in the food service and manufacturing are showing that they're showing up and standing up to provide us with the goods and services we need. So we want people to stay home where they can, but in many cases, when you talk about food service and manufacturing, certain items in particular, they're going in and they're practicing all of the safety rules and regulations that we talk about. So with that, I'd like to just introduce our Trade Vice President, Mike Pence. He'll say a few words, and then I'll make some other introductions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning. It should be very clear to the American people that President Trump has initiated not only a whole-of-government approach, but a whole-of-America approach. And the President's interaction even today and through the course of this day with leaders in industry around the country reflects that we're not only bringing the full weight of the federal government to bear, but the full weight of the American economy. And I know I speak on behalf of the President when I say how inspired we are at the way the American people have stepped up and the way that American businesses, large and small, have stepped up. It's truly been inspiring. Our task force met this morning. We continue to focus on President Trump's priorities of testing, prevention, and supplies. And in that category, I'm pleased to report that while testing is available in all 50 states, as the President just indicated, through the swift action of the FDA at the encouragement of governors around the country, now state health authorities can authorize labs in their state and expand existing testing capabilities. But also in connection with the FDA's action, which you'll hear more about in a moment, we now have continued to expand the public and private partnership that the President forged with vast commercial laboratories around the country, increasing access to the high volume, high throughput coronavirus testing that is that is greatly expanding access even as we speak. Also, our task force received a report this morning on the progress that the U.S. Public Health Service and FEMA are making, working closely with state governments and also partners in the private sector like CVS, Target, Walgreens, and Walmart to expand remote testing sites around the country. And we'll have a full report later this week as those come online. It's important the American people understand that testing is happening all over the country. But all of our health experts wanted me to tell the American people, you don't need the results of testing to know what you should do. And President Trump's 15-day coronavirus guidelines are advice for every American in every community. They're the result of the best guidance of CDC and our health experts. And as the president said, we continue to urge every American over the next 15 days to put into practice the principles in the president's coronavirus guidelines. By every American practicing these principles, we believe that we can slow the spread of the coronavirus. In fact, our experts have told our task force that if every American acts on the president's coronavirus guidelines, we could see a substantial reduction in the spread of the coronavirus. But as the president said, it will take all of us to do it. So if you feel sick, stay home. If someone in your house tests positive, keep the entire household home. Especially if you're a person with an underlying health condition, we urge you to stay home and practice social distancing from people. No social gatherings of more than 10 people. Use drive-through, as the president discussed with leaders in the industry today, and every American, especially practicing common sense and good hygiene. For the American people as a whole, the risk of serious illness remains low, but we're asking every American to partner with us in this effort to slow the spread of the virus, and especially to be mindful of seniors or others with serious underlying health conditions for whom the threat of the coronavirus can be very significant and very real. As I said, the president has continued to push our task force to bring a whole of government, a whole of America approach, and we continue to be inspired the way our nation's governors and nation's businesses are responding. We spoke just yesterday with the leaders of every broadcast network in America that will soon be unveiling a public service campaign using CDC guidelines. And specifically, as we work on the issue of supplies, meetings yesterday with Department of Defense officials about excess supplies. The president and I will be meeting today to speak about the supply chain for hospitals. We would make one specific request, and that is we would urge construction companies to donate their inventory of N95 masks to your local hospital and forego additional orders of those industrial masks. Because of what the president asked to be included in legislation moving through the Congress today, those industrial masks that they use on construction sites are perfectly acceptable for healthcare workers to be protected from a respiratory disease. But we're asking construction companies that our president knows very well from his background, we're asking them to donate their N95 masks to their local hospitals and also forego making additional orders. At the president's direction, we will continue to do whatever it takes. We'll continue to marshal the best of the American people, the best of all the people behind me, the people behind them, our state and local officials, and we will get through this, and we will get through this together. Thank you, Mr. President.
I want to thank Chad Wolf and Homeland Security. The job they did at the airports was really incredible. They screened thousands and thousands of people. O'Hare got backed up a little bit, but they got them out. But everybody was screened and screened very carefully. They didn't want to rush it. I think it was 13 airports, and it was an incredible thing. Then they had a big surge also from the UK and Ireland, and that went very smoothly. But they did a fantastic job. They worked long hours, and they did a fantastic job. I'd like to introduce Steve Mnuchin, and then I'm going to ask Steve to leave because he's going to the Hill. He's been working very hard with the Senate and with the House on a very, very big, bold package. It's going to be big and it's going to be bold, and the level, again, of enthusiasm to get something done, I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like it. So, Steve Mnuchin, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to announce some very significant actions that the President has approved today. The first I would say is earlier today, I sent a letter to Fed Chairman Powell approving his request to use 13.3. And what that will do is the Fed will be setting up a special purpose vehicle, which the Treasury will invest $10 billion in from one of our funds. That will enable the Fed to guarantee the purchase of A1P1 commercial paper going forward. That is a $1 trillion market and is critical to American workers, it's critical to American business, and it's critical to American savers who have a lot of that money in money market funds. So we heard loud and clear there were liquidity issues. This is very significant and will create, I don't think we'll need to use it all, but we have the ability to have the Fed purchase up to $1 trillion of commercial paper as needed. That has already created significant stability in the market today. The second thing I would say is, we previously talked about deferring IRS payments. The President earlier this morning authorized me to announce this program. I have previously announced we would defer $200 billion. The President suggested we increase that to $300 billion, which we will be doing. Now, let me just be clear on the specifics. We encourage those Americans who can file their taxes to continue to file their taxes on April 15th, because for many Americans, you will get tax refunds, and we don't want you to lose out on those tax refunds. We want you to make sure you get them. Many people do this electronically, which is easy for them and easy for the IRS. If you owe a payment to the IRS, you can defer up to $1 million as an individual. And the reason why we're doing $1 million is that covers lots of pass-throughs and small businesses, and $10 million to corporations, interest-free and penalty-free for 90 days. All you have to do is file your taxes. You'll automatically not get charged interest and penalties. Now, of course, any American has the right to extend their taxes. We're not taking that right, but the President has asked us to go up to $300 billion. That's also an enormous amount of liquidity in the system. The third thing is the President and I worked on a very significant economic stimulus plan. Thank you for being available last night and throughout this morning, and I will be presenting that to the Republicans in the Senate this morning and also discussing that with the House. We look forward to having bipartisan support. We're now working with the Senate to pass this legislation very quickly, and these will be payments to small businesses. We've talked about loan guarantees to critical industries such as airlines and hotels. And we've also talked about a stimulus package to the American worker. You can think of this as something like business interruption payments for the American workers. Thank you.
Do you have any questions for the Secretary of the Treasury?
When you say a stimulus package for American workers, do you mean direct payments to Americans, or are you talking about a payroll tax holiday?
Although the President likes the idea of the payroll tax holiday, I will tell you what we've heard from many people, and the President has said we can consider this. The payroll tax holiday would get people money over the next 6 to 8 months. We're looking at sending checks to Americans immediately. And what we've heard from hardworking Americans, many companies have now shut down, whether it's bars or restaurants. Americans need cash now, and the President wants to get cash now. And I mean now, in the next 2 weeks.
How much?
I will be previewing that with the Republicans. There's some numbers out there. They may be a little bit bigger than what's in the press.
Go ahead, please. Please, wait, please.
What help are you going to give to airlines specifically?
I've had discussions with all the airline CEOs this week. The airline CEOs have had conversations with the Senate and the House. As the President said, I was up with a subset of the Republican senators last night. I've discussed that with them. I think, as you know, this is worse than 9/11. For the airline industry, this is, they are almost ground to a halt. The President wants to make sure that although we don't want people to travel unless it's critical, we want to maintain for critical travel the right to have domestic travel.
$50 billion, is that
I'm not going to comment on the specifics. I will tell you we're very focused. There's a lot of workers. This is strategically important to us, and we'll be working with with Congress on this.
The airline industry will be in good shape. Yeah, go ahead, please.
There's been talk about $1,000 checks to every American, increasing support among Republicans and some Democrats for that. Would you support that going to everyone, or would you support some sort of income restriction on who gets a check?
Well, I think it's clear we don't need to send people who make $1 million a year checks, okay? But that's one of the ideas we like. We're going to preview that today, and then we'll be talking about details afterwards.
Well, I think we're going to do something that gets money to them as quickly as possible. That may not be an accurate way of doing it, because obviously some people shouldn't be getting checks for $1,000. And we'll have a pretty good idea by the end of the day what we're going to be doing.
Mr. Secretary,
Yeah, John,
Can you tell, how would the mechanics of this work? I mean, we've been talking about a payroll tax holiday, some $500 billion worth was floated to me today. But so how would this idea of sending people a check work? Would that be sort of an advance on what they would pay in payroll tax?
Again, we want to make sure Americans get money in their pockets quickly. We want to make sure small business owners have access to funds. We want to make sure that hotels, airlines, we have an entire package. We'll be laying out those details later today.
Yeah, I have to say this. There are 4 different ways you can do it. That's it. 4. You can hear me well enough, I imagine.
Sorry.
Okay. People at home, you're right. Those are very important people. Come to think of it, especially you people. Look, we have 4 or 5 ways we can do it. 4 ways in particular. I think there's a 5th possibility, but there are some very good ways of getting the money out and getting it out quickly. Payroll tax is one way, but it does come over a period of months, many months, and we want to do something much faster than that. So I think we have ways of getting money out pretty quickly and very accurately. Okay?
Can you talk about the timeline, please? How quickly do you think you can get this done?
The president has instructed me we have to do this now. So this is now.
By the end of the week?
We are going to work with the Senate, who's in session right now, actively. We will continue to have conversations with the House. I've already spoken to Speaker Pelosi once today. This is stuff that needs to be done now. The president has instructed me that this is no fault to American workers. For medical reasons, we are shutting down parts of this economy, and we're going to use all the tools we have, as I've said, and what tools we don't have, we're going back to Congress. I got to go back to
$50 billion to those who might be concerned that's too expensive.
We don't want to talk about it, but it's a substantial number. We're going big. The expression, we could do it 2 ways. We could keep going back every day or every week. We're going big, and that's where Mitch McConnell, that's the way he wants to go. That's the way I want to go. I think we want to get it done and have a big infusion as opposed to going through little meetings every couple of days. We don't want to do it that way. We want to go big, go solid. The country is very strong. We've never been so strong, and that's what we're going to be doing. We don't want, with this invisible enemy, we don't want airlines going out of business. We don't want people losing their jobs or not having money to live when they were doing very well just 4 weeks ago. So we're going big, and that's the way it'll be, and that's the way everybody seems to like it on the Hill. Any other question for Steve?
In addition to airlines and hotels, you had a call with restaurants today. Was any type of emergency assistance discussed on that call? A lot of restaurants have to close. Even if they are doing delivery, they're not making as much money as they would with a full house.
Well, let me make 2 comments on the restaurants, and the president understands this. This was emphasized this morning. First of all, we want to make sure that the states allow the drive-through portion of these fast foods to stay open, particularly in a time period where we're telling people don't go to restaurants. These companies feed a big part of America, and I expect they're going to feed a bigger part of America. The second thing they asked me to emphasize, I wasn't going to do it now, but as long as you asked, many of these companies have apps. You can order ahead of time. That way, when you get there, it's as simple as they'll have it packed. They can give it to you with social distancing, and it'll be very fast. So we expect that they will be able to feed a large part of the population. And in regards to support, I will say a lot of these businesses are small businesses, are companies, franchisees, 500 or less, and we have a specific program we'll be unveiling that helps all businesses, small and medium-sized businesses of 500 and less.
There's also a question regarding Marriott Corporation. It announced that it is furloughing thousands of individuals because of the impacts of the coronavirus. Will your legislation help those individuals?
I hope so. That's one of the reasons why we got to act very quickly. because we understand whether it's the airlines, hotels, for good reasons to protect the United States on medical issues. These businesses are shut down, and the president wants to make sure, as I've said, we will use all the powers we have. You saw this today, $1 trillion of potential liquidity into the market, and the powers we don't have, we're going to Congress. And I will say there's a lot of bipartisan support for these issues. So I'm going to apologize because I have to go deal with some other things, if that's okay, Mr. President.
Thanks, sir.
Oh, yeah, I do want to comment on this, okay? We absolutely believe in keeping the markets open, okay? Americans need to know they have access to their money. After September 11th, the only reason why the markets were closed was because the technology was disrupted. I've been on the phone with the major banks, with the New York Stock Exchange. Everybody wants to keep it open. We may get to a point where we shorten the hours if that's something they need to do, but Americans should know that we are going to do everything to make sure that they have access to their money at their banks, to the money in their 401ks, and to the money in stocks. So I want to just be very clear, we intend to keep the markets open.
And the banks are record-setting strong, so we have that, which is a much different event than what we had not so long ago. John, go ahead.
Mr. President, you mentioned the Army Corps of Engineers. I know that you've had a conversation with Governor Cuomo. He believes that New York is going to run out of hospital beds. Are you prepared to mobilize the Army Corps?
We've been asked to
increase capacity?
Yes, we're starting to. We're starting the process, and it's a process. We hope it's not going to be necessary, but it could be necessary. The state is working on it very hard themselves, but we'll probably supplement what they're doing.
And given that many of the precursors for our pharmaceuticals come from China, and there have been supply disruptions, that supply chain has been broken to some degree. Do you expect that we could run into a shortage of prescription drugs?
No, I don't see that at all, and I think China has every incentive to make sure that things work well. China wants to make sure that things work very well. They have every incentive to do so. John?
Mr. President, the governor of Ohio has... I want to weigh in real quick on what they just talked about pertaining to the food supply or the medical supply, the chain of supply coming out of China. First of all, it was very, very foolish in previous administrations that has allowed for us to become solely dependent upon China of delivering, give or take, between 70 and 90% of all our medications. That was a letdown by the previous past 3 or 4 administrations that has allowed for this to occur. You talk about being set up for a fall. You talk about a breach of security. That's just about as much of a breach of security as you can get whenever you're solely relying upon a communist-controlled country such as China overproducing 70 to 90% of all your medical supplies. That's the most craziest freaking thing that I think that I've ever heard of. Ever. It's one thing to rely upon to them for your 52-inch TVs. It's one thing for you to rely upon to them towards having cheaper software in the Walmart softline department. It's one thing to rely upon China because of your cosmetic jewelry that you get in various places that are basically good quality as far as the cheapness, but in reality they're still generics. They're still forgeries. But to rely upon to a country over your people that's keeping you alive or keeping them safe or keeping them well, it's just something mind-boggling that I can't even believe that the Reagan, I don't think the Reagan administration played a part in it, but the Bush senior administration started to play a part in it, and then the Clinton administration played a part in it, and then the Bush Jr. administration sure enough played a part in it, and of course, who pursued in behind those 3 administrations? Well, you got it, the Obama administration. These administrations have set us up for a fall pertaining to our medical supplies. Also, if you get to looking at the chain of command pertaining to what actually we depend upon, pertaining to our resources that we now find in our supermarkets. Give or take, about 90% of everything that winds up in Walmart pertaining to lettuce, tomatoes, fruit, anything pertaining to the greenery comes from Mexico. Comes from down south because they live in a warmer atmosphere, and they basically have food production 12 months out of the year. Not only do we rely upon a great deal of our produce that comes from there, but we also rely upon a great deal of produce pertaining to the food supply of canned goods, stuff that's boxed up, stuff that's put on the shelves in regard to Mexico. Mexico isn't just building automobile parts. Mexico is producing a great deal of our food supply that keeps us alive and well every day. Keeps us thriving and going. If Mexico, our southern neighbor, was to get hit by the coronavirus like they have in other parts of the country, in which right now they've been very lucky towards keeping it out of South America and Mexico that we know of. But if they was to ever get bombarded by this pandemic, it could be devastating to the food supplies coming from our southern neighbor. It would get to the point that not only could they not work in the fields towards cutting the cabbage and gathering up the tomatoes, but they wouldn't be able to box them up and take them to the factory so that they could be canned up and boxed up towards being delivered to the American people. This could get very, very serious. Extraordinarily serious. In lots of different ways. I understand that right now, the gun industry and the ammo industry has climbed about 200% just within the past week in comparison to what it normally is. Once more, people are acting in a negative way to this problem. You know, whenever you get to looking at what happened with the major pandemic of the Spanish flu in 1918. 1918, they claim on document that 650,000 people died here in the United States alone. The pandemic supposedly went around the planet on 3 different occasions because it come in different formalities or different waves. You keep in mind, in 1918, the majority of the people in America didn't have TV. In 1918, the majority of the people were still getting around on horse and buggy. In 1918, the majority of the farms was self-sufficient in producing their own food. In 1918, the vast majority of the household only had one gun, and it was a long-armed powder gun. Today, the Americans don't hardly produce none of their own personal food, unless you're just fortunate that you live in the South and you do believe in gardening or truck patching. Today, give or take, probably per household has 2 to 3 automobiles per person just sitting around. Today, the average household probably has, give or take, about 6 to 8 to 10 guns. Of course, there's exceptions to the rule in some of your people out there that are gun nuts, gun freaks, that has 25 or 30 or possibly even $500,000 to $1 million worth of guns in their home, in their basement, with all kinds of artillery, waiting on Armageddon. But today, we have all these different communication forms that they did not have in 1918 that helped reduce the panic helped reduce the panic because they couldn't communicate one to another other than maybe 2 or 3 miles, whoever lived on the other side of the hill or whoever lived on the other side of the valley or whoever lived down in the grove. You know, that was basically your formal communications. And if the truth be known, probably 650,000 is probably a conservative number towards the people that died during the pandemic during the 1918 Spanish flu. The point that I'm trying to make is this. This is not a time for haggling. This is not a time for BS. This is not a time for people to lose it. This is a time for people to remain straight-faced. We need good, sound mind judgment calls of what is occurring, not only here in America, but throughout the world. Especially those who are affecting our lives, either directly or indirectly, regardless whether it be people like China that produces 70 to 90% of our medication, or people down in south below us, our southern neighbor that produces a great deal of our greenery pertaining to our apples and oranges and peaches and tomatoes and our strawberries and our lettuce and tomatoes and a great deal other of our produce that comes from there. This is a time that we must unify as a global society. This is not a time for arguing and debating. This is not a time for partnering with parties. This is a time to unify in our communities and throughout our country and throughout this planet if we are going to survive this in a not only physical way pertaining to the sickness or the disease, but also in an economical way. Before the coronavirus ever struck America, America was already depleted. America was already sick with heart attack, stroke, high blood pressure, diabetes, tuberculosis, Lewis-Gehr's disease, cancer, strokes, sexual transmitted diseases. Before America ever got hit by the coronavirus, it was already struggling in various departments towards hospitals, literally almost at the brink of shutting down. Various communities pertaining to counties struggling with the healthcare system pertaining to Medicare, Medicaid, that wouldn't pay but about $150 on a ambulance visit to come and pick up somebody, and in exchange an ambulance visit should have been somewhere in the neighborhood of $700-800. So the medical industries here in America was already struggling big time towards maintaining their payrolls and maintaining their bills. This, in exchange of what is occurring, is probably going to topple not only the American economy, but going to topple pertaining to our national debt that is going to reach a level of proportions to the point that not only will America have to default, but basically the whole global society. Once more, what are we going to do to prevent from this happening again? You know, it was asked the question to me just the other day, what about money? Is money contaminated? Does money possibly have contaminants of the coronavirus disease on it? Absolutely. When you have a person that's sniffling and sneezing and they're constantly blowing their nose and then they handle a 20 or handle a 10 or handle a dollar bill, absolutely. It's not as bad today as what it used to be back years ago whenever it comes to exchanging one germ to another person. But money is still very, very nasty whenever it comes to being a conduit of being able to pass one germ to another person. I believe that it's time that not only America but the world started looking deeper into these issues. That what would be a safer exchange in our bartering? Would it continue to be based around the good old American dollar bill? Or would it be based upon a cashless society pertaining to a digital persona are an entity that would help not only to prevent diseases from being spread from one person to another, but would also keep everybody in check towards making sure that their activities was not under the ground, was not being participated in pertaining to illegal activities, regardless whether it was buying drugs, regardless whether it was paying Mexicans for pennies on a dollar to work down in some of the fields down in Florida, or some of the fields out in Arizona, or some of the fields out in Brownsville, Texas, or in the restaurants or the hotels. The cash situation has become a corrupt conduit in different ways, to the point that it has been one of the entities that has helped to bring this national debt out of control the way that it is right now. So after this is all going to be said and done with, after we're probably going to add another, I hate to use this mark, and it may be an unrealistical mark, but $5 trillion added onto the $23 trillion is probably a very, very conservative number. As the individuals we just got through talking to you, this exchange of what's happening right now with the airline industry compasses what went on in 9/11 probably 4 to 1. 4 to 1. That's how bad it's become. The brunt of the blow is naturally going to be brought up onto the federal government. The federal government is what holds the purse. The federal government is what holds the debt pertaining to the original $23 trillion that we are now currently at. To say that the current national debt will exceed over $28 to $30 trillion within the next few months is not an unrealistical number, especially if our government is going to hold up its people like it says that it is, in which it ought to. This is a test. This is a trial and test pertaining to our democracy, to prove to the rest of the communist world countries that we can and will provide for our people on a diplomatic front, and that communism has failed, and it will continue to fail, based around the unfairness that it treats its own citizens, and based around a heathenistic dictatorship that is not only unfair to the rest of its citizens, but is wrong to the rest of the world. It would be the same thing as the pharaohs dictating and dominating during the time that the children of Israel was held under captivity under that type of rule. So please, this is a time to engage upon to patience. This is a time to engage upon credibility. This is a time that we should give people the decency that if they feel like that they need to emotionally release some anxiety, don't take it at heart. Don't get so upset to the point that you take everything on the sleeve. Because if you put your feelings on your sleeve, odds are they're going to get hurt. Especially during a crisis situation. Let's listen to some more of what's going on here. I just thought that I would engage, that I would weigh in pertaining to the supply chain, pertaining to the medical supplies coming out of China. If China was to do something dirty and nasty to the point of stopping all medical aid, that would be an act of war. And I think China would know that pertaining to them doing something like that. And I feel like that Russia would support our endeavors if China was to cut off all medical aid. And let's just pray to God that that doesn't happen. And let's also pray to God that the coronavirus does not interfere with the food chain down on our southern coastline of our neighbor that we solely depend upon a great deal of our apples and oranges and our peaches and our strawberries and a great deal of the stuff that, yes, gets produced and boxed up and put on the shelves for us to eat every day so that we can survive. So this is necessary. This is essential. This is imperative that you follow instructions to the letterhead and that you do what professionals are telling you to do, to restrain, to limit, to try to suppress, or try to mitigate this problem to the point that it is not going to be so overwhelming to societies, not just one society, but to societies, that it will be self-sustainable in the end and that we will be able to bounce back as a productive entity and go on with our lives in a peaceful, prosperous way. Good luck to all of us as we're winding this up with the President of the United States, the President of the free world, speaking today on St. Patrick's Day.
Called off the election that was supposed to happen today, the primary election. Do you agree with that decision, and what steps are you taking to ensure that elections going forward, if this pandemic continues, that elections will be able to happen, including, of course, the big one in the fall?
Well, the governor of Ohio is doing a great job. He called that off, and we'll see what happens. There's a court case, and it hasn't been fully determined yet. But if he called it off, I could understand that because, he's definitely somebody that knows what he's doing. We'll be seeing what very soon. They're going by the rule of 10 as opposed to 50, and that's pretty tough. I would say probably you could violate that if you wanted to for an election. I just think an election is a very special thing. He chose a different date, I think a date sometime in June. But that would be a decision that would be made by him. He felt it was necessary. The courts somebody's challenging it, so the courts will ultimately decide.
But what are you doing to ensure that further elections, if we're still in this situation a month from now, 2 months from now,
what I'm doing, John, is very simple. We're getting rid of this virus. That's what we're doing. That's the best thing we can do. By the way, for the markets, for everything, it's very simple solution. We want to get rid of it. We want to have as few deaths as possible. This is a horrible thing. You look at what's going on with Italy. We don't want to be in a position like that, but a much larger, because we're a much larger country. We don't want to be there. And I think we've done really well. I think we've done well. I think the states have done well. We're all working together. The best thing we can do is get rid of the virus. Once that's gone, it's going to pop back like nobody's ever seen before. That's my opinion. But I think it'll pop back like nobody's ever seen before. Please.
Mr. President, just to follow up on John's question, specifically how many new hospital facilities could the Army Corps of Engineers build? And also, what specific measures are you taking to try to increase the number of ventilators in the stockpile?
Right. We've ordered massive numbers of ventilators. We have, by any normal standards, we have a lot of respirators, ventilators. We have tremendous amounts of equipment. But compared to what we're talking about here, this has never been done before. And yesterday I gave the governors the right to go order directly if they want, if they feel they can do it faster than going through the federal government. Now, we've knocked out all of the bureaucracy. It's very direct, but it's still always faster to order directly. And I gave them, that was totally misinterpreted by the New York Times on purpose, unfortunately. But it's very important. Yes, Mike?
I could amplify.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you. The President directed us to work with the Department of Defense. There's two ways that DoD can be helpful in terms of expanding medical capacity. I know the governor of New York has asked us to look at the Army Corps of Engineers, which could perhaps renovate existing buildings. But the President also has us inventorying what you all would understand as field hospitals or MASH hospitals that can be deployed very quickly. We spoke with Governor Inslee yesterday in Washington State. We have resources in that part of the country that we could move. And as governors make these requests, we will process them, bring them to the President. But there are two different lanes that DoD can provide, in addition to many medical supplies to augment our national reserves. And the President has tasked us to evaluate, make available, and to consider every request from governors for either field hospitals, expanding facilities, or the Army Corps of Engineers that could retrofit existing buildings.
The Army Corps is very prepared to do, as we say, and we're looking at where it's going. But and they do call them MASH hospitals, but the field hospitals go very quickly. They're we have them. We have all of this equipment in stock, and we're looking at different sites in a few different locations. And we're not going to need them in West Virginia, where so far I guess they have none. Still none, right? West Virginia.
No.
Big Jim, the governor's, he must be doing a good job.
Or is that just reported?
That's what's reported.
No, but is that a reporting issue, or is that they have no cases?
Well, that's all that, I just see West Virginia is the only one that has no cases. So obviously that's being treated differently than in New York or California, different parts of California. I do say this though, the Army Corps of Engineers is ready, willing, and able. We have to give them the go-ahead if we find that it's going to be necessary. We think we can have quite a few units up very rapidly. I'm going to work with Governor Cuomo. I'm going to work with a number of the governors. Governor Newsom has been very generous in his words, and I'm being generous to him too, because we're all working together very well. And I think a lot of very positive things have taken place. We're talking to California about different sites, but we can have a lot of units up fairly quickly if we think we need them. I think what I'll do is I might ask Seema to say a few words on the telehealth, and then we can get back to this, please. Seema?
Thank you, Mr. President. And as the President announced earlier, we are doing a dramatic expansion of what's known as telehealth for our 62 million Medicare beneficiaries who are amongst the most vulnerable to the coronavirus. And we're acting in accord with the appropriations bill that was signed on March 6th, as well as the President's emergency declaration last week. And this action is a part of our broader effort to ensure that government requirements, rules, and regulations don't get in the way of patient care during an emergency. And today's announcement builds on the significant progress that the President has already made over the past 3 years around telehealth services. And while we have allowed for virtual check-ins, full telehealth benefits have been restricted to those living in rural areas, established patients, and just for those brief visits. But no longer, Medicare beneficiaries across the nation, no matter where they live, will now be able to receive a wide range of services via telehealth without ever having to leave home. And these services can also be provided in a variety of settings, including nursing homes, hospital outpatient departments, and more. And thanks to the leadership of HHS, we'll also be temporarily relaxing certain HIPAA requirements so that doctors can provide telehealth with their own phones. And we'll be using enforcement discretion when it comes to collecting copays so that cost won't be a barrier. This is a part of our larger efforts around mitigation. And as we are encouraging Americans to stay home whenever possible, we don't want our Medicare policies getting in the way. And so consider the implications of this. Perhaps an elderly patient with...
Well, you know, I just had an episode happen to me pertaining to up the road here in Union City of the gas grow place that performs different types of things pertaining to the HIPAA issue that you just got through talking about. And even after me obtaining and receiving the right to put that information on my YouTube platform, and it's had many, many hits since then in helping other people with diabetes pertaining to weight problem, I was penalized and punished under the HIPAA law on these regards. And that was after me getting permission by the head nurse of being able to record that particular episode. Now she claims, or they claim, not so much she claims, but they claim, that I broke the HIPAA law policy because it was nothing discussed about me putting that out to the general public pertaining to my YouTube or my social media platform. My reply was, you know, I'm a minister of God. I'm not just a messenger of God. I'm a minister of God. I'm just not bringing forth the message of God, but I'm displaying the qualities of being a minister of God by trying to help people. And I'm not supposed to charge people under the Good Samaritan laws towards trying to help those who want to be embarked upon what I have to say as far as my request or my recommendations. In other words, if I make a suggestion, you either need to do this or don't do that, I'm not going to charge. It's kind of like the honor system, which this community around here has failed in for the past 30 years. The church sector has failed in because I haven't charged them not one red cent pertaining to my story and getting my story out to the general public, regardless of who it may have offended or who it may have assaulted. I haven't charged nobody nothing. And to see the community still clam up and treat me as ugly as what the community around here has is an insult to humanity. It is a crime of humanity that one day these people will have to give an answer to on the day of judgment in regards towards how come they responded and reacted the way that they did during the time that somebody such as myself was trying to help them. Trying to help them, not hurt them. In other words, I'm not just a messenger bringing forth a message. I am a minister. And by the decree of the ministry's decree, I'm not supposed to charge. Silver and gold, such as I have none of. But such as I have, I give unto thee, according to Paul. And according to other disciples and apostles in the Bible. An exchange, why they are giving you hope and giving you the instructions of how to become born again. That way, whenever you do perish from this fleshly body that we're all in, you'll be enlightened and be given a spiritual life. You're not supposed to respond in a negative way. You're not supposed to respond in an ugly way. You're not supposed to respond towards attacking that individual. You're supposed to be decent, respectful, and have gratitude because that person was willing to step out and give you something such as this. That's the reason why the Bible says, blessed is he who cometh in the name of the Lord. Not curses is he, but blessed is he. They've been treating me like I was the plague around here, like I was a curse. Simply based around the fact that they did not like the message coming from the messenger pertaining to end-time biblical Bible prophecy of end times. And it's the truth. It is the gospel. I'll say that in front of Tommy Thomas. I'll say that in front of Tommy Moore, Judge Tommy Moore. I'll say that in front of retired Chief David Moore, that now runs this facility up here in Martin, Tennessee. I'll say that in front of Randy Brundridge. I'll say that in front of any preacher or anybody associated with the clergyman. That by and large, we are not supposed to charge for ministering to the people. We are not supposed to charge for bringing forth a message to the people. That's the reason why I continue to say that this ministry called the Windmill Ministries Missions did not fail the community, but the community failed the ministry because the community should have picked up and helped the founder of the ministry, in which they didn't. Why they didn't, I don't know. I can't answer that. I'm not them. I know that one day they'll have to give an account for it one day, because I have done my work since the anointing fell upon my life in 1988. After the 9 tapes went to the White House, I went forth conquering and to conquer with this message. Not because of anything that I can do in and of my own self, but because of the Holy Spirit working through the messenger. In and of myself, I'm nothing. In and of myself, I can do nothing. But in God and through God and because of God, that's what makes all of us something. Especially if we'll stay in the guidelines of the Heavenly Father. If we'll stay within the guidelines of being that in which what God has called us all to be. Not just one person, but all of us. So I just wanted to hash that over pertaining to the HIPAA law, that I tried to do the right thing, and once more I was penalized or punished for trying to do the right thing by putting out that particular message about diabetes and about being overweight on one of my YouTube channels, in which I was always under the impression that pertaining to my records, regardless whether they was medical records, regardless whether they was political records, regardless whether they was legal records, regardless whether they was criminal records, that I have that right as an individual that I can produce, especially if it's factual, and provide it to the general public at no cost. Now, if the public wants to continue to be snub-nosy, if they want to continue to be defiant, if they want to continue to be ungrateful by treating me like I'm some sort of a disease on account of it, well, that'll be up to the public. That's exactly what they done to Noah. Noah being the messenger. Noah had a message to prevail to the general public. And the message was that if you continue to do what you're doing, God's going to destroy you. Well, they didn't like that. And because they didn't like that message, they ridiculed poor Noah. They demonized poor Noah. They dehumanized poor Noah. But Noah remained on his quest, because Noah knew that God was going to be true to his promises. God knew that God, the one that spoke to him about what God was going to do what he said that he was going to do. And sure enough, when the last nail got driven off into the boat, and when God drove or herded in the last animal, and Noah and his family entered into the ark, according to the Bible, it says that God shut the door. Noah and his family, or none of the animals, participated in shutting the ark door. God shut the door. And it began to rain, and rain, and rain, in which at that time rain was unheard of. They didn't even know what rain was. The only thing that fed the vegetation at that time was big dews. Big dews early in the morning is what fed all the vegetation. But it began to rain, and the people began to scream and holler, and it was just like the 10 virgins. 5 of them was foolish, and 5 of them was wise. The wise foolish had enough oil to sustain themselves, while the 5 foolish asked for the oil, and there was no oil to be given, because if they would have given the oil, then there wouldn't have been enough for the 5 wise. So it's going to work in exchange the same way. In Noah being a messenger of God, Moses was a messenger of God. The book of Daniel was a messenger from God. The book of Revelations, enhanced and inspired by the Holy Spirit pertaining to John the Revelator, was a messenger from God. Jesus Christ was a messenger from God. I can't help how the public responds and resists in this resistance movement that began in my life going all the way back in 1980 and 8. I can't help it that these churches has banded me. I can't help it that I got kicked off the radio waves because I was issuing out a message on WENK up here in Union City. I can't help it that Brother Randy Brundridge decided that he was going to show his rear end, the mayor of Martin, towards having the cops called on me in Central Baptist Church. I can't help the reason why that they responded and reacted the way that they did in First Baptist Church here in Martin, Tennessee, or First Baptist Church in Jackson, Tennessee, the very church that I helped to construct and build, that I remained on the construction site, give or take a little less than 2 years. I can't help how people respond to the message. All I can help is me being the messenger. And as long as I stay in the hollow hand of God towards issuing out the message, I have done my part. I have done my part. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to criticize not only this man, but they're going to criticize this man. And they're going to criticize this lady. And they're going to criticize all these other people that you've seen up here in the past week or so that has been bringing forth this message, because it's a message that is an unpopular message to the general public. Do you think that the president or the vice president wants to put out a message like this? No. They don't want to do this by chance. But this is their job. This is why that we've hired them, to let us know what's around the corner. That way we don't get blindsided. Just like that's the reason why God brings forth prophets and brings forth messengers, so that the general public, especially the Christian public, the Christian society, won't be caught unaware and won't be blindsided of what is coming down the pike. Nobody wanted to support the messenger, which is talking to you right now, because they was upset about the message, like they was going to be able to stop the fulfillment of biblical Bible prophecy. You're not going to be able to stop the grand designer that designed everything, including ourselves, if it is written in the cards for it to be fulfilled. That's what Acts 23:9 speaks of, that if this be of God or an angel have spoken to this person, we find no evil in this person. Who are we to fight against God? And that's exactly what this community around here is going to give an account for one day. They haven't been fighting Juby, per se, the individual that's talking right now. They've been fighting the message of Juby. They've been fighting the message of Juby, the very message that Juby had to bring out to the general public. That's what they've been fighting. They haven't been fighting Juby. Juby had never done nothing to Tommy Moore. Juby had never done nothing to Tommy Thomas. Juby had never done nothing personally to David Moore, the ex-chief of police up here in Martin, Tennessee. But man, they sure have fought Juby. They sure have. Now let's look a little deeper into this thing. Was they actually fighting Juby, or was they fighting what Juby stood for? Was they fighting Juby's message? Go back. Put your thinking caps on. Go back and remember what the tale was, in which it wasn't a tale, it was the fact of why everybody was coming against old Noah and accused old Noah of being crazy. Noah, you're crazy. You're this. You brought up this ideal. Noah, you're out here beating and banging on these boards. You're building this boat, and it hadn't never rained a drop out here. You're mad, Noah. You're absolutely insane. And then there was other ones that said, no, he's doing this for a reason now, boys. I'm telling you, he's scamming. It's a celebrity stunt. He's trying to be a celebrity in the neighborhood. And the whole time, Noah wasn't doing none of the above. Noah was being obedient to Noah's God because God had gotten tired of that type of atmosphere, and God promised Noah that he was going to put an end to it, and he did. And not only did he promise Noah that he was going to put an end to it, in which he did. If you watch the movie, the latest movie about the flood of Noah, which was a good movie, but God also promised Noah, after the boat had landed, he promised Noah, Noah, I will never ever destroy the world again by a flood. The next time I destroy the world, it will be with fire and brimstone. It will be with fire. And that's the course that the world has set itself in sail of, towards the atmosphere becoming warmer and warmer and warmer, and steadily pulling all the resources out of the ground pertaining to the oil and the natural gases. And we're basically on a suicide mission right now, not only with our nuclear devices pertaining to our nuclear bombs, but we're basically on a suicide mission right now pertaining to the greenhouse and the global atmospheric conditions that are changing right in front of our very eyes because of mankind. And we're too stupid to see it. So now intervention has been deployed upon to the planet. And God has lifted his protected hand and allowed for Satan, all right, Satan, you're in the job towards out to kill, steal, and destroy. You're the author of confusion. There you go. God has lifted his protected hand upon to the society that has caused these problems, that has engineered even more problems to society. But there is light at the end of the tunnel, if people will listen, if people will follow instructions, if people would do the right thing. There is light at the end of the tunnel. That's the reason why in the first 4 chapters of Revelations, he not only promised us that he would throw us off into a bed of sickness pertaining to tribulation, but he says to repent, and go back and do thy first works over again. In other words, get it right this time, better than what you did the time before, pertaining to the meek inheriting the earth. Because if we don't, I promise you, things is going to only escalate and become even worse and worse and worse. And you can call it a dictatorship type God, if that's what the terminology that you want to use. But the fact of the matter is, God did not design a bunch of heathens. Whenever God gave his instructions to humanity, he meant for us to go by them. And it wasn't necessarily to go by them on account of God being a dictator, but it was for our own benefits. It was for our own good that we didn't jump from bedroom to bedroom, distributing sexual transmitted diseases from one person to another. It was for our own benefit that God said to rest on the Sabbath day. That way the body, the human body, could have time to rest and to reproduce the different things that makes things work properly in our bodies. He didn't necessarily design the Sabbath day because God wanted to keep it holy for his own purpose, but it was to be kept holy for the benefit of humanity's purpose. See, people, whenever they get to looking deep into the teachings of the 10 Commandments, there's not very few of them that's actually resonated around God himself. Very few of them. The rest of them are resonated around the benefit of ourselves towards humanity. If you look at the 10 Commandments. And as I told the individual, just as of yesterday, in a Walmart down in Humboldt, God will not make us serve him. But what he will do, and I have said this throughout the past 30 years, he will make us regret that we did not serve him. He will make us regret that we was not obedient to him. He will allow for certain things to fall up into our lives that can be detrimental and disturbing in many different ways. And the way that this community around here has attacked me, they have brought insult to injury into my life. This was not self-induced. It'd be different if I was out here selling drugs. It'd be different if I was out here committing adultery with all these whores around here. It would be different if I'd beaten all these people out here on car deals, or that I was begging for money like a beggar or a panhandler out here on the road. I ain't done none of the above. And they know it. That's the reason why I say that this ministry has not failed this community, but the community has failed this ministry for various reasons. And I hope to God that we as a society will not fail this president that has now stepped up to the plate finally in acknowledging that this coronavirus is not only real, it's not only lethal, but it's here. It's here. The fox is not at the gate. The fox is in the gate. And he's destroying. He's out to kill, steal, and destroy. And these group of people know it. And they see it. And they're acknowledging it. And they're giving us instructions as messengers. This is the strong professional advice coming from the top. Does that mean that they like it? No, they don't like it. But they're the ones that stepped up to the plate and said, you know what? We're going to work for the people. We're going to do what is best for the people. And plus, I think this is also God's way of purging or draining the swamp. I think Mr. Trump needed some help in draining the swamp. Now, some people may get offended in what I just said. But the fact of the matter is there's consequences in everything. There's consequences in how we treat each other, and there's most definitely consequences in how we treat God. And if you continue to bite the hand that feeds you, eventually that hand will quit feeding you. That's the bottom line. You continue to be disrespectful and unloyal to God Almighty, the one that created the heavens and the earth, the stars and the moons, and everything around you, including yourself. You continue to be disloyal and disrespectful to that entity, and that entity will turn on you like a biting dog. And that entity will show you. He'll show you. For as many, in the first 4 chapters of Revelations, it says repeatedly to the 7 churches, for as many as I love, I will rebuke and chasten. You can call it tough love. You can call it whatever you want to call it. But this is our new reality, and we're going to deal with it. And we're going to deal with it just like other cultures and other societies dealt with it. And if you don't deal with it appropriately, I'm sure there'll be various law enforcement agencies out there that will tone you down real quick if you get out of hand and start becoming unruly. Because there will be law and order upon to not only this particular ground called the United States of America, but there will be law and order on this planet. There will be order. While the Christian society is still here upon to this planet, there will be a order. Now, after this Christian society has been taken out of this society, then you can make up your own order. That will be whenever the false prophet and the Antichrist will rule and reign. But until that time, God's still in charge. He's going to continue to be in charge until the meek inherit the earth. You can tell that to all these Antichrist-type countries and all these Antichrist-type people. Because it's coming, and it's coming near a neighborhood near you. Just like the Walmart slogan. Let's listen to the rest of this. And once more, I can't say it enough. Good luck to each and every one of us. Good luck to all of us.
Diabetes needs routine checkup. And
let's back up just a little bit where we can get what she's saying into full perspective. I don't want to cut her off.
More. And thanks to the leadership of HHS, we'll also be temporarily relaxing.
See, I don't know who HHS is. I'm sure somebody out there knows, but I don't know who HHS is. I'm sure I can look it up. I can Google it, who HHS is. It's probably got something to do with the medical association.
Certain HIPAA requirements so that doctors can provide telehealth with their own phones, and we'll be using enforcement discretion when it comes to collecting copays so that cost won't be a barrier. This is a part of our larger efforts around mitigation, and as we are encouraging Americans to stay home whenever possible, we don't want our Medicare policies getting in the way. And so consider the implications of this. Perhaps an elderly patient with diabetes needs routine checkup, and this has nothing to do with the coronavirus. And so with our new telehealth benefits, this person who's not really, who's at risk for the coronavirus doesn't have to venture outside their home. They can talk to their doctor via Skype, and they don't have to risk exposure to the virus, and they can receive that care from the safety of their own home.
Exactly.
It could be another Medicare recipient who's experiencing mild flu-like symptoms, and instead of leaving the house and sitting in a waiting room full of other vulnerable people, they can also receive advice from their doctor from their home.
Exactly.
And this shift is very important for clinicians and providers who over the coming weeks will face considerable strain on their time and resources. And now Medicare patients who don't absolutely need to come in to an office won't have to, and this allows the healthcare system to prioritize for care for those that are that have more needs or in dire need, and preserves protective equipment as well. State Medicaid agencies can also provide telehealth services without federal approval, and so we're asking all states to make this available as well. And we've also asked private insurance companies to expand their telehealth benefits and make it clear to their providers and their members what they cover. As our nation seeks to balance the twin imperatives of getting Americans the care that they need during this outbreak and limiting the spread of the virus, the impact of this historic action simply cannot be overstated. In an emergency, those on the front line shouldn't have to worry about federal rules and red tape, hamstringing them when they need flexibility above all else.
Absolutely.
And we're doing everything in our power to make sure that that doesn't happen. I also just want to briefly mention that because of the president's emergency declaration, we do have the ability to provide a lot of Medicaid waivers, and Florida was the first state to be approved. We were able to do that in a matter of days. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yes. Where do senior citizens go for instructions on how to do the telehealth?
They should call their doctor's office, and their doctor's office can tell them how to do that. Also, there may be some of our Medicare members that may not have access to equipment, so we're asking family members to help with this, but also respecting the requirements around social distancing, and if any of those family members or neighbors have symptoms, they should obviously stay
Will
away.
you be posting numbers also?
That's correct,
That might
exactly.
be the easiest way to do it.
Yes.
If you post in ads, if you post some numbers.
And they can also call our 1-800 Medicare number, and they can also get information. Those phone lines are open.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Admiral, if you'd say a few words about where we're going, and then I'd like to ask Dr. Burks to say a couple of words about how the system's working.
Well, thank you very much. As we talked about earlier this week, the commercial system is rapidly advancing in the testing capabilities. As of today, our public health laboratories, meaning the CDC and the public health labs, have reported out 31,878 tests, so almost 32,000 tests. The clinical laboratories, the Association of Clinical Laboratories, have reported out about 27,000 tests. And most importantly, of those 27,000 during the cumulative period of time, 8,200 of them were yesterday. This is showing the dramatic ramp as the high throughput comes in. We don't have the numbers this morning from the American Hospital Association, which means all the individual hospital laboratories. We will have that upcoming in the next day or so, and then Ambassador Burks will have this whole process fixed with the legislation that everything will roll up into a common reporting probably by the end of next week. In terms of our drive-through laboratories, again, these are blossoming all over the country by individual states. The ones that we are heavily involved in and really pushing equipment to, we expect over the next few days to begin setting up 47 of these in approximately 12 states. The material is already palletized and being shipped to the locations. Most cities have the specific locations, some do not, but it's still going to a central receiving. And we know that we'll be deploying at least 140 Commissioned Corps officers. About half of the sites have reported their requirements. About 140 officers will be going. We expect that to go up. So this is going on the way we expected. We did a trial site yesterday with a full mobile unit for drive-through with full PPE. We had a lot of kinks in the system, as you can expect. That's why we do a test before we go out into the field. Don't expect these to be 100% perfect the moment they come. They're going to be adapted to the state and the local situation, but we're very confident that these will add testing to the already very robust healthcare system and commercial system. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Eddie. And this has never been done before, and it sets a great roadmap for future. Should we have something like this in the future? I hope we don't. But it's never been done before, and they've done an incredible job. And again, we're working with the states and relying on the states. We have to, because they have, it's point of sale, it's point of sight, and we're in, I think, just about every instance getting along really well with the states. If I could, Dr. Birx, if you could say a couple of words, please.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. So I think what you've been hearing from us is to find solutions that are high quality and sustainable based on the frontline workers and governor's requests. And those come in on the governor's call. We've been immediately responsive to those. And that's the level of red tape and bureaucracy that we have removed. I think that point about sustainability and quality is very important because, as the president says, we're creating a roadmap for a different level of functionality for future pandemics. Our flu pandemic preparedness plan was a plan. Now we're seeing where we have to revise, where we have to create new avenues of research, new avenues of work to really ensure that the need of the American people can be reached. We were adamant about having a high quality test based on our commercial vendors. Over the next few months, you will begin to see that other tests that were utilized around the world were not of the same quality, resulting in false positives and potentially false negatives. These tests were studied and studied by the FDA to really ensure that they are that level of quality. And we've given the states the permission to ensure that same level of quality. Now, I want to just say 1 minute on the testing. Testing should not be used as an assessment of your risk. We are asking every single American, no matter what your generation, from Z and up to X and millennials in between, to really ensure that you're following these guidelines. We hear every night of people who are not in work, moving that time into bars and other areas of large gatherings. If we continue with that process, we will fail in containing this virus. So every single generation has a role to play. We're asking our older generation to stay in their homes. And we're asking the younger generations to support them in social contacting through videos and other Skype-type functions, or just the simple telephone. We're asking the younger generations to stop going out in public places, to bars and restaurants, and spreading asymptomatic virus onto countertops and knobs and grocery stores and grocery carts. I heard an innovation last night and this morning again on the news. I really want to applaud the private sector who are now creating senior-only shopping times. I think that's extraordinary. I think that shows what America brings. And I think other countries will learn from us about how to really protect seniors in this type of way. I'm hoping it carries through to next year when we have our flu epidemic, where we can really have a very different profile of the amount of mortality that we have during flu that we never talk about. Anywhere from 15,000 to 45,000 individuals are lost every year. If we learn how to do this well, and sustain some of those core changes, we can change the way respiratory viruses, not only for this, but the future, affect Americans.
It's a big thing.
Yeah, so a question on the clinical data. So we've had now roughly 5,000 people test positive. We've had 90 deaths or so. When are we going to know the data of who those people are, who has been infected, what the ages are, what the pre-existing conditions are, how serious it was, both for those who have been tested positive, but also those who have died?
Well, you're singing my sheet of music. I'm very data oriented, so thank you for bringing up this issue of data. I really want to applaud HHS. We had a discussion about this several days ago. They've made calls into Seattle and California to really understand that, and also importantly to understand how many of their patients needed ventilators, how many of them needed oxygen support, how many of them needed and what they needed. Could we predict early someone who was going to have a more difficult course? These are all the questions we're asking and answering right now. We did get an early report back from Santa Clara and Seattle. We're digesting it. We just got it this morning. We're looking at that carefully because we think that roadmap is very important to other communities. We have not discussed this with New York yet. We do know from other countries, and that all is available online, that profile. You can see that mortality under 30 is extraordinarily low. The mortality across the board outside of Wuhan is now settling somewhere around 0.7, but that should not be reassuring because it's much higher in people with pre-existing medical conditions, even if young, and people that are older with pre-existing medical conditions. And so we still want every American focused on doing what they can do today to change the course of this pandemic.
We're committed to making that data public so we will all know.
We're committed not only to making it public, but to have a website that everyone can see in real time.
Dr. Birx, if I could just follow up, you all are signaling a much more aggressive posture toward containment mitigation now. And many states have been very aggressive, but there is a small number of states that have not issued public guidance to their residents. Is it important for the success of the effort that 100% of the states be forward-leaning on this? And if so, Mr. President, what would be your message to those states that have not? Okay.
So that's why the Vice President and the President yesterday issued those critical guidelines. As I said this morning on Fox and Friends, you can look at them as guidelines, you can look at them as requirements, and you can look at them as the President asking every American in every state to follow those. That's why we put them out at the federal level. We wanted to make sure every American knew what they could do today to change the course of this epidemic. I think it's empowering. I think it says all of us have a social responsibility to each other, and that's why we believe that every mayor and every governor should be instituting these guidelines that came from the White House and the President of the United States.
And we've been very tough in those states. I know exactly who you're talking about. We've been very tough in that. Thank you. Please, go ahead.
A follow-up question on the testing. You've been telling us for days now that millions of tests have been sent out. So why have fewer than 60,000 people actually been tested?
I think you will see different numbers this week. You heard just at 8,000. Remember, all of these tests, the high-speed tests, were approved last Friday night, and last Thursday night. I think if I could talk to Thermo Fisher and the other groups that have these platforms out there, do not rely on a pull technology push out those tests. Because we can only make them available, groups have to order them. So we've been talking to Thermo Fisher, one of the key platforms, to push out tests based on need and not wait for orders.
And is that what the issue is, getting the tests out, or is it getting the tests conducted?
That's a great question. I know part of it is getting the test out right now. I think the Admiral and others are working on getting the issues related to getting the test conducted. Obviously, that does take time. He is working on innovative solutions that are creative and sustainable, that will be a game changer in testing, but we don't have the data yet. This is a critical comparator. Can you do it yourself? Can you actually sample yourself? These are the kinds of things we're working on right now, and he's getting the data for us.
And the states are actually doing a lot of it. The governors and the states are doing a lot of it with even our tests. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Can you give us a sense of how long?
I want to comment on that. If you're living in the right state, if the state officials and the local officials have taken this serious enough to the point that they are engineering some sort of a plan in those regards. And I hate to say it, but the state that I'm living in will probably be one of the last to initiate any type of emergency medical expansion. I think it was only yesterday that they finally decided to shut down the school industry, and some of those schools won't be shut down until either Wednesday, tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow. So once more, you're talking about a day late and a dollar short pertaining to various states that have not been up on top of this in recognizing the severity and the seriousness of all this, which speaks volumes about the politicians in those states that really could care less about their own citizens. And I hate to say it, but Tennessee has the officials in Tennessee has let down their Tennesseans, 7 million people, in various ways. And I could take you down a list from workman's comp to A to Z on what that they have embarked upon that has been nothing more than a disgrace. A disgrace. I come back here to want to help a group of people that David and I knew, my brother that died in 2017, that knew that needed help. But it's kind of like me dealing with my niece out in California. If you're not willing to help yourself, can't no one just take a magic wand and wave over you, and all of a sudden you become whole, you become healed. And I'm not saying that healing such as that didn't occur during the Bible days, and I'm not saying that healing such as that don't occur even to this day. It does, to far and few between. But by and large, if you want a healing, you have to be dedicated in wanting that healing, because God knows that if He was to heal you, you wouldn't be grateful for the healing. Once more, you go back to biting that hand that fed you. God is not going to continue to withstand the blessings upon to an individual if that individual is phony and fake, and if that individual is not real with their relationship with God. He will restrain those blessings. That's the reason why He speaks about it in the first 4 chapters of Revelations. For as many as I love, I will rebuke and chastise. God does not chastise you because He doesn't love you. God chastises you because He does love you. You better hope that God occasionally will chastise you from time to time towards keeping you in line. Because that's telling the individual that God must still care about me enough to keep me in line, to chastise me. It's whenever He rebukes you. That's the part that you don't want, towards being rebuked. Because once He lifts that umbrella of protection off of your life, and Satan basically can attack you and destroy you, not only physically but emotionally and spiritually, then you're in bad trouble. You're in terrible bad trouble to that point. You see, Satan come at Job thinking that Job was going to break down and going to wind up cursing God and dying. And Job's relationship with the Heavenly Father was real. It was sound. It was to the core. It was rooted in how he believed in his God. And even though all kinds of bad stuff happened to Job, because of his realness in his relationship, was blessed abundantly. And that's exactly what's going to happen to all of us eventually. if not in this lifetime, but in the lifetime to come, if we will remain solid, if we will remain committed. And it does, it takes a commitment, because the Bible says that he who shall endure until the end, the same shall be saved. You have to endure to the end, regardless of how hard the battle may seem, regardless how many temptations, regardless of how bad that people ridicule you and put you down and criticize you and dehumanize you. You have to be sound to the core. You gotta be rooted. The same as Job. Job was rooted.
These tough new restrictions will need to be in place until we start to see the rate of this virus going down. And also, can you speak to this study that as many as 2.2 million people in the United States could die if there weren't this type of action by the government taken? To what extent did that prompt what we saw yesterday?
I think, models are models, and they're based on input, and they're based on infectiousness without any controls. I can tell you we've never seen that level of infections that modeled up to that 2.2 million in mortality. So we are looking at that. We are having a particularly model meeting tomorrow. I think that's really going to be important. I've dealt with a lot of modelers in my time. They're wonderful people. But they all have their favorite inputs and they all have their favorite integration functions. So we're evaluating all of those so we can integrate and create the best model for the United States.
Models are projections. They're projecting this is going to occur. It's kind of like whenever you project the seriousness of a hurricane. You project where that hurricane is going to go, how substantial that community is going to be hit, rather than that it's going to be ravaged lightly or ravaged heavily. These are models. People does this every day. It's almost like a guessing game. Some of the models are accurate, some of the models are disaccurate. Just like whenever you see the projection of a hurricane, you see all those little red lines. Sometimes it'll have 24 different red lines. Well, this is the European projection. This is the American projection. This is this projection. This is that projection. And out of those projections, out of 24 projections, more than likely one of them is going to nail where that hurricane goes. More than likely. Because it has been already modeled. It has been projected of where the hurricane probably is going to wind up being susceptible and going. It's the same way with this disease that we're looking at right now. There'll be projections of people that will project and say, well, it's going to affect this many people, and this many people's going to make it through it, and this many people's going to die because of it. These are all guessing games. Various people are good at it. They make projections. They make models. Is it because that they don't know what a real job is and they don't have nothing else to do? No. People want to know how dramatic that something is going to be before it ever happens. That way you won't get hit blindsided. That way you'll have some sort of an idea. Well, do we need to maintain, let's say across the board right now, that there's, I'm just going to use this for an illustration real quick and throw it out there. Let's say right now that they got on average of 250,000 caskets per state. Per state. 250,000 per state. Or let's even jack it up. Let's go 500,000. There's 500,000 casket makers that have got 500,000 caskets per state online, ready to buy. All you got to do is tap or go to the facility and buy your casket. And I'm sure it's going to vary from one state to another because, you don't need to have, let's say, 500,000 caskets in Nebraska versus Florida or California or New York. I'm sure there's going to be many more caskets in Florida or California or New York than it is in Nebraska. or South Dakota or North Dakota because there's less of a population. But it just gives people a broader ideal towards, wow, we need to start building more caskets because they don't have 250,000 caskets in Florida. And Florida right now should have probably 4 million caskets. Or California should have 8 million caskets, and they don't have but 3 million caskets. It gives people a projected ideal of various needs that's going to have to be accommodated because of the certain catastrophe that's fallen upon to society right now. And of course, you got to keep in mind the vast majority of the people now who are younger, say from 45 to 40 years old and younger, the vast majority of them don't even require caskets. They'd rather be cremated. All right, well, how many cremation facilities do we have? Do we have enough cremation facilities up in New York? Do we have enough cremation facilities in Los Angeles? Do we have enough cremation facilities in Atlanta? You know, where you ordinarily had 4 cremation facilities, maybe we need 8. Maybe we need 16. People sit down and itemize these things, and they look at these things. This is part of unifying our forces. That way we will not get caught so unaware of the problem that could excel and exceed on levels such as it has occurred in China. We have professional people that look at these things. They look at the numbers. They graph it out. And is what would be the right word? As mortifying as it may sound, these are the facts of what happens to all of us as far as life and death, regardless whether it be age, regardless whether it be the conditions of the city or the conditions of the country. These people, it's just like Walmart, before Walmart ever builds a supercenter, they'll sit down and they'll analyze a community and see how many people's at work, how many people live in that area, how many people are retired, what's the closest Walmart, whether or not that area will accommodate another building, another Walmart. You got people that analyze all this stuff. That's what they do. This is their job. They're not going to put one supercenter right beside another supercenter if there's not enough population growth in the area to accommodate 2 supercenters in the same town. That would be foolish for Walmart. And they have actually closed down some Walmarts before because it wasn't justifiable in keeping that store open for whatever reason. Sometimes the population turns on Walmart and rather shop at Kmart, or rather shop at Big K, or rather shop at Fred's or some other store rather than shopping at Walmart. And if that be the case, Walmart shuts the door down, declares bankruptcy on that particular building, that particular project, and moves on to the next bigger and better thing. You got people that project certain things that's going to happen in certain areas. That's why they call them professionals. That way we do not get caught blindsided to the point that it winds up being total anarchy like it was during and in the 1918 pandemic that occurred over the Spanish flu.
Based on the best data. And that first set of recommendations you saw were based on what we could do today to prevent anything that looks like that. If I could just say one other thing to the hospitals and dentists out there. Things that don't need to be done over the next 2 weeks, don't get it done. If you're a person with an elective surgery, you don't want to go into a hospital right now. There's a lot of distraction. There's a lot of people doing a lot of other things to save people's lives. So let's all be responsible and cancel things that we can cancel to really free up hospital beds and space.
And I'm going to use this for an illustration real quick. I know for a fact that my friend Bobby Sue up in Nashville had a son that on the first of the year, New Year's Eve, had a massive heart attack. Then he had another heart attack. Then something else happened to him. It wasn't until about 3 weeks ago that he finally got out of ICU and they put him over in the recovery up in Nashville, Tennessee. Well, since he got out of recovery, she's been going once a day, getting on her clothes, taking a shower, and going and sitting by her son's bed between the hours of 10 up until about 2 o'clock, giving him support, moral support, because he still can't walk. He is getting out of the bed and he is getting in a wheelchair, going to various places. But since this pandemic has broke out, she is no longer allowed to go and sit beside her son's bed. They have quarantined the hospital to the point that they do not allow visitors into his room so that she can sit and preoccupy his mind in giving him good, strong moral support. I'm sure that on a case-by-case basis, if somebody was involved in a major accident and they was in ICU and they was at the point of fixing to die, I'm sure that the hospital would make exceptions towards allowing for the family to come on in to be able to mourn and to give their last goodbyes to their loved one. I'm sure that they'll take it on a case-by-case basis in these hospitals that have to prioritize things in a different format, because keep in mind, we're dealing with something that is irregular. We're dealing with stuff that is abnormal right now, and people, the same old isn't the same old no more. And people need to recognize that, regardless whether they be a visitor or they be somebody trying to go into a hospital. You have to recognize these things, that we are not dealing with normal situations. Please take these things serious.
And then let's do everything that we can to ensure that we don't need the ventilators because we protected the people who would have needed to use them.
Right.
Are you looking at the possibility of more actions like, for example, limiting travel within the United States? Are you looking
It's possible. It's possible. We'll see how it goes. I think there's been great cooperation with local governments, states. We'll see how it goes. It's going right now pretty well. Yeah, please go
Can I
ahead.
follow on that, Mr. President,
Please,
very quickly?
yeah.
Just very quickly. Do you need to invoke the Defense Production Act to get more of those medical supplies to different
Well,
hospitals?
we're able to do that if we have to. Right now, we haven't had to, but it's certainly ready. If I want it, we can do it very quickly. We've studied it very closely over 2 weeks ago, actually. We'll make that decision pretty quickly if we need it. We hope we don't need it. It's a big step.
Need more help from the federal government when it comes to those supplies.
When you say the states,
to those
in
governors?
particular, 3 states need some help, and some states, have 2 people, 3 people, no people. In the case of, again, West Virginia. So we're looking at it very closely. We've taken it apart 15 different ways. It's a very difficult thing to do. It's a very big step, and if we need that step, we'll take it.
Quick follow on Kristen's first question. A lot of people have got travel to places that aren't considered hotspots, Caribbean, Mexico, that sort of thing, over the next few weeks. Would you recommend that they follow through with those plans?
I would just say enjoy your home stay.
Lay
I would
low.
just say right now. We have to get this problem.
Hunker down, dig in. Hunker down, dig in. Lay low. Accept this as a reality right now for what the world and the planet is having to be enduring right now. That's what I kept telling people every time that I would put something on one of my YouTube platforms pertaining to the coronavirus. This is serious. This is serious. This is serious. This isn't Hollywood. How many times did you hear me say that? Just like whenever I end, I usually always end by saying shalom, which means peace, and good luck to all of us. And I mean that. Good luck to all of us, because I knew these things was coming down the pike because of biblical Bible prophecy that predicts them. If you know anything about the Bible, it's actually a handwritten manual of what's going to occur to society. Not only in the past, but in the present and in the future. That's the reason why we have people that study the Bible, that look at the Bible, that interpret the Bible. And I'm not talking about necessarily scholars. I'm talking about people that has enough sense pertaining to interpreting, transliterating, and translating the Bible in the proper form in today's society during the time that society is going through what society is going through. Because, believe it or not, that's why they call the Bible the living Word of God, because the same scripture that meant one thing 100 years ago